Hello, how are you doing? Um, good day, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time you're watching this video. Welcome to another math lesson with Mr. Woodford. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to go over lesson 2.3, which is talking about dividing integers. So if you have your packet with you, feel free to look on with me um, as we dive right into the lesson. All right. As usual, with every lesson that we have, the first thing I would like you to do is be able to work on the bell work. So if you look here, you'll notice that there is a bell work that you see. It is solving the problem below and then answering the following statement. So let me give you about a minute or so at this point in the video. You can pause the video, rather. Pause the video to answer the bell work questions, and then I will go over it. So take a second, see if you can answer each one of these. What is negative 2 times 0? What is negative 5 times 4? What is negative 7 times negative 3? And what is 4 times negative 9? All right, and then also, I apologize, there's also an E down here. The product of two negative integers is always what? The product of one negative integer and one positive integer is always what? And then the product of 0 and any integer is always blank. Awesome. All right, so let's dive in. So we're talking about dividing integers today, right? As we're in this new unit of multiplying and dividing integers, our goal is to be able to divide rational numbers, or even right now at this point, we're talking about integers. Integers are considered rational numbers. We know an integer is any number that is on a whole number that's both positive and negative, right? We know fractions and decimals are not considered integers, even though they are considered rational. All right. What I want to talk about is the properties a little bit today, as well as your fluency to be able to quickly come out with answers. I know using a calculator, you can fly right through this worksheet. But at the beginning level of this particular math class, I want to help you build your fluency more than help you just use the calculator. Even though we are going to take time to get familiar with the TI-30XII, right now I want you to get better at just your fluency in math. So let's look at A, B, C, D, and E. I am going to quickly write down what you should have got as your answers. And you just double check your work, okay? And we're going to talk about the properties afterwards. Negative 2 times 0 is 0. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. Negative 7 times negative 3 is 21. And 4 times negative 9 is negative 36. Okay? Now, before I go on to the rules, I want you to be able to understand something. Notice here, a negative times 0, anything times 0 is 0, right? A negative times a positive in B gave us a negative. However, a negative times a negative gave us a positive. And then 4 times negative 9 gave us a negative 36. So the product of two negative integers like C is always what? Positive. Okay. Whenever you multiply two negatives by each other, they end up becoming positive. Multiplying, not adding or subtracting. I want to make sure we understand that. When we add two negative numbers, the answer is negative. But when we multiply two negative numbers, the answer becomes positive. The product of one negative integer and one positive integer is always negative. Okay? And then the product of 0 and any integer itself is always 0. It doesn't matter if the integer is positive or negative. That's important for us to notice, right? As we dive in, as we gain further understanding, these are part of rules. If you know you're doing a negative times a positive, you should remember your answer should be negative. A negative times a negative should end up giving you a positive. These are certain things you might want to hold on to and memorize. Let's dive in. Let's keep going. So how do we divide integers? That's what we're going to talk about today, right? We're going to talk about that. And a vocabulary word that comes into play here when we talk about dividing integers is a word called factor. A factor, right? A factor is a number or a quantity that when multiplied with another produces a given one. I believe when you were younger, you learned about common factors. You learned about, um, factors such as if I ask you for the factors of six, you would say two and three. Those are the things that break down to give you that particular number. That's the same thing I want you to think about here as we dive into looking at factors here. Okay. Um, The good news is when we talk about the modeling here, some of the numbers that I'm giving you, they're not complex, they're not difficult. They are numbers that you already have an understanding of. Um, so you should be okay with it. Okay. So for example, A, B, C, and D. I'm going to do these 4 modeling problems for you. Um, and they should be rather easy because these are numbers that should have a little bit more. I believe that at this point in math, you guys are better at multiplication than you are at adding and subtracting. So I believe we should be able to fly through these. But there are little things I want you to pay attention to, which are the signs and when you might get zero. All right. So for example, A, we have 10 divided by negative 5. 10 divided by negative 5, right? So in this particular situation here, they want to know when you take 10 particular numbers, you divide it by 5, in this case, negative 5, what is our answer? Okay. For some of you, right off the top of your head, you know that this answer here is negative 2. Awesome. For some of you guys, you're like, I have no idea how that is even possible. Okay. Notice that if I take 10 numbers and I divide them both by 5, right, how many sets of 5 are there? There's one set of 5 here. There's another set of 5 here. Now, remember in the properties of multiplication, you got to also remember, understand something. The properties of multiplication are the same for division. So a positive divided by a negative is going to give you a negative. They have the same properties, okay? Whereas if you look at B here, right, it's a negative divided by a negative. And just like the properties of multiplication, a negative times a negative is going to give you a positive. Same thing here, right? So these are some things to hold on to, right? To remember that the multiplication and division rules, they work the same. If there's 2 negatives, whether they're multiplying or dividing, the answer is going to be positive. If there's 1 positive, 1 negative, like A, the answer is going to end up negative. So let's dive into B. So negative 44 divided by negative 4, right? I could draw 44 circles. I could do something like that. But you should know that that itself is going to equal 11. And because they're both negative, it's going to stay positive 11, okay? Right. If you needed some type of notes to have here on the side, I would probably write something like this, right? A positive divided by a negative equals a negative, whereas a negative divided by a negative equals a positive, right? These are some notes that I would have on the side. Okay. Now looking at C, C a little bit different than both A and B. We have 0 here. Remember we talked about 0 with multiplication. Anything multiplied by 0 equals 0. We know that, whether it's positive or negative. That's the truth of what we're talking about. C is also in that same exact mindset, right? It says 0 divided by negative 5. Okay, and in this particular way, we know the answer is going to be 0. But I put a double asterisk around this because I want to point out something that may confuse students. This right here, 0 divided by negative 5, is not the same thing as negative 5 divided by 0. Okay, these are not the same. Okay, and the best way I can explain it is if I use regular numbers that you and I can understand. Okay, for example, let's say I had 10 people, right? Um, but I don't have any pizza, right? So let's say I have no pizza, but I have 10 people. How much pizza will these 10 people get? 0 divided by 10 means that nobody's getting any pizza. But if I had 10 pizzas and I wanted to divide it by nobody, then this doesn't make any sense because the pizza is going to rot, spoil, and the ants and the mice and people are going to, and ants and mice and insects are going to get it because nobody can get it. Why are you trying to divide it by nobody? 0 doesn't make any sense. So if you ever see 0 on the denominator, this is a big deal. If you ever see 0 on the denominator, that answer is undefined. The answer is called undefined. But if 0 is in the numerator, right, the answer is 0. So notice here, this one's in the numerator. I'm going to write the word numerator, right? Whereas this one here is in the denominator, okay? If it's ever in the denominator, you need to say, oh, 0's in the denominator. That means undefined, which is another way of saying that cannot be calculated. If you try to put 10 divided by 0 on even a calculator, the answer is going to come out to say error because it doesn't make any sense. Okay, so I just want you to remember that 0 in the numerator, yes, it's equal to 0. 0 in the denominator, undefined. Okay, we'll take more time. We'll practice with that another time as well. Okay, and lastly, let's look at D, right, which is negative 44 divided by 0. Oh, I kind of I skipped over stuff and I should have went right to D. Look at what happens here. Negative 44 divided by 0. And do you notice when I have a division sign, I try to write it as a fraction? You should know right away that a fraction is really just the operation of addition. So if there's ever a chance where you have a fraction and I say, okay, well, calculate what that is, you should say, oh, all I'm doing is dividing the numerator divided by the denominator. So I rewrote it. Instead of writing it like this, I wrote it as negative 44 fraction bar 0, which says negative 44 divided by 0. And once again, I'm saying, okay, well, what is this equal to? Is this equal to 0? No, it's not. Because is the 0 in the numerator or the denominator? The 0 is in the denominator. So in this case, my answer is undefined, just like I explained to you. 0's in the denominator, undefined. 0's in the numerator, 0. Okay? All right, now these parts, just like in multiplication, these are called factors. These are the parts that'll give you an answer, okay? And our goal is to find the other part of the factor. So 11 times negative 4 will give us negative 44. Negative 2 times negative 5 gives us a positive 10. Notice inverse here, right? The inverse of multiplication is division, which is what we're working on. We're working ourselves backwards, okay? Take your time, run through the actual independent practice, double check your signs, double check your answers. And once again, I want you to pay attention to like C and D. If it's in the top, 0's in the numerator, make sure you write 0. If 0's in the denominator, make sure you write undefined, okay? The rules are still the same. If the product itself is the answer is negative, this is a key rule right here. If I said to you the answer itself was negative, then you need to know one of the factors need to be negative, okay? So for example, if I look at A, I see that when I divide here, the answer is negative. That means one of these two is negative, which is true. Okay. Take your time, work on the independent practice, divide these numbers as best you can. Do it without a calculator. I believe you can do that. And then we'll take our time. We'll go over it in class together. Okay. If there are any questions, as usual, feel free to post a question in Google Classroom where I can be able to answer you, or see me after school so I can be able to better help you and assist you in this area. All right. Thank you so much for joining me with another math lesson with Mr. Woodford. Until next time, I'll see you. Have a wonderful day.